So it's so lovely to be back in this wonderful theatre. The last time I was here was, I think, March 12th last year with the Oxford Philharmonic Orchestra, packed house, normal conditions. When we look back on that, it was the last concert before lockdown. I mean, it seems like another world now.
I know. Yeah, I guess I was at the Dupre Hall in Oxford not that long before that. And of course, there was no question then. We had no idea what was going to hit us. But I've been here twice with the Oxford Philharmonic. Once a couple of years ago, playing Elgar.
And didn't you do their first ever concert?
I did their first ever concert.
Amazing.
That's quite a proud boast, isn't it? It was a different manager. I remember he had a monocle. He's the only person I've ever met with a monocle. So I was very impressed by that.
I'm not sure how relevant that is.
It's very relevant. It was somehow very good for Oxford and Sheldonian. And yeah, it was their first ever concert. We did Saint-Saëns, I think.
So now we're doing Haydn.
Well, yeah.
Say something about the Haydn Cello Concerto.
It's the most beloved of all classical concertos. I mean, of course, Haydn wrote at least 2 cello concertos. There might be some lost, but I'm not sure about that. Some people say there definitely are. Some people question it. But for many years, there were 2 Haydn cello concertos, both in D. But the one that's actually by Haydn, people thought was by Antonin Kraft. And the one that isn't by Haydn, it's by a guy called Costanzi. People were sure was Haydn. So there was one undoubtedly authentic Haydn concerto, which wasn't at all authentic, wasn't by Haydn. And then the very late 50s, this C major turned up in the Czech Republic. And
in somebody's
a library. Yeah, in a library.
Yeah.
And of course it quickly took over, I mean, to the extent that next season, this coming season, I was booked to play the Haydn D major with the Philharmonia Orchestra. And then the message came back, sorry, the D major doesn't sell, it's the C major we want. So, I mean, everybody loves this concerto. I love the D major as well, but this is certainly the C major, which we're playing tonight, is the more perfect piece. They're both full of joy.
Yeah.
The D major is sort of operatic, and the C major is truly instrumental. It's virtuoso, but it's virtuosity at the sort of service of this incredible joy that Haydn radiates.
Would you agree that, I mean, I just love the way you play it, and sometimes...
I'd agree with that, yeah.
Yes, I'm sure you would. You're so modest.
Yeah.
But would you agree that sometimes, particularly the last movement, is played like some kind of trapeze act?
I can't stand
whereas, in fact, it's got so much more musical depth in that.
It's got charm and everything. I mean, people like to play it like a incredible exercise to show off how fast they can play, but it's not even marked alla breve, which is, which would make it a faster tempo. It's not marked that.
I totally agree. Right, that's quite enough about cello concertos, especially if you want lunch.
All right, you're dismissing me. Good. Okay, then I better ask you about the symphony.
Yes.
So, I gather we just both learned that the symphony was premiered 200 years almost
Here.
to the day
Isn't
in
that
this
incredible?
very place.
Absolutely.
That is incredible.
It is incredible that Haydn stood here. And there are lots of there's some newspaper articles about his time in London and Oxford, about audiences, running to the front just to get a glimpse of Haydn, because he was like a rock star to these.
He was, and the orchestras loved him because he used to call them my angels, my treasures.
And he loved being in England, I think.
He did. Yeah. He did. There's lots of diaries, including a romantic relationship he had with a lady in London. I think that improved his time. And there's her diary as well.
Very topical.
I so hope he slept well last night. Anyway, but what makes this symphony an Oxford symphony?
He was here to receive a doctorate at Oxford
University. A speech in Latin.
In fact, it was originally planned to be performed in Paris, I think. It was written for a Parisian, and then he brought it on his travels, and you could call it one of the London symphonies, actually. It's certainly a miracle.
But not here, you couldn't.
No, but it was, I'm not sure if it was pre-planned to premiere it in Oxford. But, I don't know all 104, I know a lot of them. And the consistency, the level of fantasy is quite incredible with Haydn. And in a way you could argue more than Mozart, because Mozart, the last few symphonies are, of course, absolute miracles. But if you go back to the early symphonies, 6, 7, 8, all the way through, it's the level of craftsmanship, fantasy is extraordinary.
Oh, you mean of Haydn?
Haydn.
Absolutely, because Haydn was much older than Mozart when he wrote his first symphonies.
That's true.
Haydn just, was a was a caterpillar that became a butterfly, whereas Mozart was always a young butterfly.
And he probably wrote too much that we're not familiar with them all. But I've heard some really terrible performances, but I've never heard a bad Haydn symphony.
No, I mean I think some are even more inspired than others, but he's always experimenting, and it's just completely different from Mozart. They were friends, of course, and it's wonderful, their friendship. And like there's a wonderful letter where Haydn has been asked to write an opera. He said, "Well, I could, but I would more highly recommend Mozart to do it," which is so nice.
Yeah, it's so lovely.
I don't think I'd ever do that for another cellist.
And I was reading a little bit of his. It's not a very reliable biography by Caprani, but he said something which I completely believe, that when they went for walks together and when Haydn was walking through the countryside, he would take notes and he would write a narrative, a story for each symphony, but then he would throw it in the fire afterwards, and so we're left with our own narrative and fantasy. And I think this symphony it's got joy, it's got what we call Sturm und Drang, real drama, and it's got humour, and it's the most wonderful symphony to play in the Sheldonian Theatre.
Sounds like
I hope you all enjoy it.
It sounds like the concerto. It's a good program. Let's hope we don't mess it up.